What's up guys, it's Azrain here, and we are going to do something a little bit different. This is going to be a video concerning the changes in the Gen 6 metagame and even the tiering system and how it's shaped to be the official metagame we know now in Gen 7 Monotype. So back in the day, things weren't really as set in stone and very straightforward as they are now. So here is the forum for Monotype back in 2013, and as we can see, we have this guy Ryan, who was formerly known as Hollywood, and he was kind of running shit here, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So if we look on this forum right here, this is a little bit more modern, and this kind of has all of the major events of the forum. So the first event that we're going to be looking at is Talonflame, right? So if you were there for Gen 6, then you know that Talonflame obviously got banned. If you weren't there, let's kind of take a look at this forum. If we search for the word Talonflame right here, immediately post 14, and remember this is coming off of a new meta, Gen 6, so there was a lot to talk about. Fairy types, defog, sticky web, like there was a lot of stuff to talk about. But so immediately on this forum, post 14, which is pretty early on, is literally this guy's like, Talonflame overtakes Heatran as the complete bane of my grass team. Is anyone noticing threats popping up? So, and this guy immediately just responds after it, you know, oh, Talonflame is blah blah blah, you know, all that stuff. And then, you know, now the ball starts rolling. You know, there's some other random posts going on here, but now everybody is starting to talk and discuss Talonflame, you know. So bingo. So on post 41 here, we have Hollywood bring it up finally. Talonflame being both mono flying and mono fire, and basically, you know, it was up for debate, and the main argument for banning Talonflame was it kind of makes types like grass and bug and fighting completely just shit. Like to be fair though, grass, you know, while it's still kind of a meh type, like having a Talonflame on a flying type team or a Talonflame on a fire type team, it just makes it just gross. And you know, that's the debate. That's what the debate was, I guess. And then, like, for example, people would just argue and have discussions, you know, calcs right here of choice band Talonflame, you know, versus Cradilly, versus Terrakion, versus Cobalion. And, you know, Talonflame ran more than just ban. It had SD Roost, it had Taunt Wisp. It could even go special for those Fizz Death things that could tank Talonflame's hits. So then there was lots of debate, you know, lots of calculations. And then as we just go down the thread, you know, you can read the thread for yourself. I'll go ahead and leave a link to that. But eventually, what was decided was right here. Boom. So on the 176th post, after all of that debate, we finally came to a decision from Ryan over here, and he decided that we're going to ban Talonflame. And basically, his reasoning is basically that mono bug, mono grass, and mono fighting would have more room to grow and prosper. This is literally a quote right there. And he says, mono flying will still be a great type, as we all know. If you played the Gen 6 meta, mono flying was one of like the big three, I would say, which was Psychic, Steel, and Flying. And then mono fire still had a lot to work with, even with the banning of Talonflame. Talonflame's oppression on those types, I guess, helped for a healthier metagame, and that's why I guess he decided to ban it. And there was a lot of debate too. And as I was reading this thread, like, I also saw a lot of just, you know, people just arguing main versus Frost. And this was back, you know, when Frost existed. Basically, all of Monotype was run on Frost, where all the good players just came from Frost, the independent server, away from main, where all the Monotype people who wanted to play pretend gym leader were chilling. So basically, the first event in Gen 6 was Talonflame being banned. So the reaction to that, basically, this guy also, he says he felt uncomfortable making a decision, so then he kind of said he would hold a vote with a council or something like that. So I guess the workings of a council, or the Monotype council, were kind of like dug in this post, I guess. But it wouldn't come until after a while. Then he just asks, what do you think about Talonflame being banned? And then there were a few people who had some, strong opinions. They were mad that, one person made a decision to ban this guy. Like, there's this whole tirade right here. Like, once again, you can read it. And, a suspect, they said, oh, you should have just banned Gale Wings. Oh, you should have just banned, you should have just had a suspect test or something like that, Since some counter arguments to that were like the suspect test, it's held in OU, but at the time, Monotype was a very small metagame that probably wouldn't have a big enough showing for the suspect test. In fact, people were talking about is 1500 on the ladder good enough to have a vote or something like that? And when the top of your ladder is like 1500, then that's pretty ass. That's a pretty small. Amount of people. So, after all this tirade and all that stuff, what exactly happened, I guess, to the metagame, you would say? Well, grass was still grass, and bug was actually still solid, as you'll see later with some of the mods introduced, and then some mods eventually banned. But what happened was mainly that, well, at least in my opinion, maybe I'm biased because I was a fighting main at that point, or I'm fighting co-main, was that fighting actually began to prosper, because people were saying that it would be ass because of the fairy types, but there was a thing on fighting called Mega Metacham, and Mega Metacham hit like a motherfucking truck, had dual priority and all that stuff, and fighting was a very, very good type. And if Talonflame existed, I really don't think it would be as good as it was, because then fire would become very oppressive to it, and flying would be even more oppressive to it. Flying was very beatable. Like, a fighting type team could definitely beat a flying type team in Gen 6, compared to now where fighting is ass in the meta. Definitely the banning of Talonflame helped fighting for sure. And it didn't really hurt Bug, Volcarona sweeping, Mega Pincer sweeping, that also helped a lot. So yeah, that's the first event that happened in Monotype, which was the banning of Talonflame. So here we have a post, and fast forwarding to about August 2014, 2 months before ORS came out. Somewhere in between, there were discussions about how OU and Monotype should kind of separate from each other. The metagame was still called OU Monotype, and people were wondering, why is this banned, or why is this not banned? OU's not doing it, And basically, they were talking about, Monotype shifting away from OU and becoming its own tier, and Talonflame was kind of the first step in doing that. So their solution was to create their own ban list and have very complex bans involved. And so basically, here's a list of deviations from the standard OU ban list. And as you can see, Aegislash, Deoxys Defense, Deoxys Speed, Genesect, Kyurem White, and Shaman Sky were all freed from their Uber chains in the OU metagame. Aegislash definitely helped Ghost a lot, because at that point, Mega Sableye didn't even exist. So there was really no defensive backbone, and there was no Ghost Steel type, so who was switching in on Dracos or fairy type moves per se? Deoxys Defense and Deoxys Speed were both good on Psychic. They had their niches. Deoxys Speed was a guaranteed lead for offensive Psychic. Deoxys Defense sometimes would be Toxic, or it could even be Cosmic Power user. So, but they weren't really broken. Genesect was very good on Bug. It had the Bolt Beam coverage and typically ran Scarf. Kyurem White was a monster on Ice. It made a crappy type like Ice. They tried to make types like Ice and Grass rise up, and they tried to do that by freeing Kyurem White and Shaman Sky. Shaman Sky typically ran a Scarf set, Healing Wish, Air Slash, and it spammed it with Serene Grace. Kyurem White ran Specs, Scarf, and sometimes even the occasional Assault Vest. Now, as you can see, Aegislash and Genesect were very are both steel types, and they were very broken on steel. So eventually what ended up happening was that they would have a complex ban where they were only allowed on Ghost and Bug respectively. And then you can see here also with the items, Mega Mawile was allowed while OU banned it. Mega Mawile was a very good switch in for fairies. You know, besides Klefki, there were no other like relevant steel types. You know, because regular Mawile is kind of ass. And then coming up in this post, in the modern part of this post, what we have is Damp Rock. Damp Rock becomes banned. As you can see, like I said before, Aegis Slash is banned on steel. And then Genesect, I think Genesect wasn't banned on steel this part, but I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just like looking at stuff here, and because this is a lot of stuff a while ago that I don't remember. So then, eventually, you know, they start to ban some other things, and then we move on to ORAS. So right as of now, what we have is some freed Ubers. We have the banning of Damp Rock, and then ORAS comes around, and then we're going to get into that in the next part. Now we're moving on to ORAS, in the beginning of ORAS, where there was a bunch of new Megas released. Mega Lopunny, Mega Altaria, Mega Salamence, Mega Bro, and the first thing to unfortunately get the ban hammer in Monotype was Salamencite. So Mega Salamence was essentially banned. That's really, I mean, it's not really that debatable how busted Mega Salamence would be in Monotype. It's great, it's bulky, it's fast. You know, Aerialate was nasty. It still is pretty nasty today. So yeah, there's not really much to say about that. But then we'll move on to the two bans that, you know, people did have stuff to say about it. And those two bans involved Mega Slowbro and Mega Mawile. Now, as you can recall, straying away from the OU ban list, we did not ban Mega Mawile yet up to this point. But coming into ORAS, it started to become wow, I can't fucking talk. It got to a point where it's like, wow, Mawile is pretty broken. And actually, we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the main reasons why people and eventually this guy here decided, let's ban Mega Slowbro and Mega Mawile. So for Mega Slowbro, it's pretty self-explanatory, because with Mega Slowbro, you would lose Regenerator, and at the beginning people were like, oh, okay, this is not gonna be as good, you know, because Regenerator is a fucking broken ass ability, but Shell Armor is also nasty as well, you know, because the thing is, Slowbro doing Calm Minds makes it a GG. If your toxic user is gone and like Will-O-Wisp won't do the job, literally if your opponent no longer has any toxic users and Slowbro is still there, he can finish up and clean up late game, because base 180 defense. Think about that. Mega Slowbro with base 180 defense. That's absolutely ridiculous. And it has 130 special attack, and typically it only needs like, you know, Psychic and what you call it, and Scald, which is broken as hell. You know, great move. And if you don't want that, you can go like Iron Defense Rest or something. Basically, Slowbro is a ridiculous endgame mod that, you know, with Shell Armor, that was the only way you could break through it, because a lot of the times, haven't you seen in OU where the only way to break a Calm Mind Clef is to crit it, you know, or to break a Sableye to crit it? And that's the same thing here, but with Slowbro you can't do that. And therefore, it was banned because it usually took only 1 to 2 Calm Minds to secure the win, to be honest. And it really doesn't have any risk in terms of setting up, because no crit, no trick, and with support to stop toxics, it's pretty scary. Now moving on to Mega Mawile. Mega Mawile was basically just a threat finally realized, because coming in with an Intimidate and then Mega Evolving, and if we look at Mawile stats, it's pretty bulky. A 105 attack, but with over base 100 defense. I think it's on base 125. Correct me if I'm wrong. But with that kind of bulk, you can just SD. And what makes Mawile so crazy is the fact that it can learn Sucker Punch. And back then, Sucker Punch was 80 base power. So Sucker Punch shenanigans, you know, like, would definitely ruin somebody's day. Like, I don't know, there are so many Pokemon, where, they could KO Mawile, but they would die to Sucker Punch. Without the Tapus existing, Mawile really, Sucker Punch was actually pretty scary because even though there were Fairy types around, it was run on Fairy Mono, and a lot of the metagames still crumbled to a +2 Sucker Punch, and if you had +4, it was basically over. And then with Knockoff, Play Rough, Fire Fang, and all those other coverage moves, it was just very overwhelming. So therefore, Mawile was then rebanned globally. And then in this post, it shows that they were looking at the next steps to see how broken Sable Knight was, only for Dark though, and then Mega Medicham and Gallade. But they actually decided to go in a different direction, and that direction involved Shaman Sky and Kyurem White. So now we have Kyurem White, Shaman Sky, and Mega Gallade getting sent to the Shadow Realm. Well, Mega Gallade only getting sent to the Shadow Realm on Psychic. So basically, they had a tier philosophy change at this point, where initially it was about creating a metagame where all types could be equal and we could all be one big happy family. But that's not really the case, because in this time in the metagame, Psychic, Steel, Flying, and Water were kings, and basically those were the most spam types on the ladder and in tournaments. So basically they shifted and said, okay, new tiering philosophy, and it says it right here. The new tiering philosophy was that all types can be used, basically. So there's the difference between being used and being viable is much different. So, we're not trying to raise up Grass and Ice to the level of Psychic. We're just going to make it so that you can use Grass, and that, something like Talonflame, which literally just rocks Grass, unless you're running niche checks, just absolutely demolishes it. So, in terms of reasons to ban, then he came up with this list right here, where the first point was basically if it promotes type-based matchups, basically kind of like counter-teaming, where it's like, you're just hoping when you battle somebody that you hope you get Ice versus Dragon, or you hope you get Ground versus Electric, instead of actually trying to work your way up to a neutral matchup between Dark versus Psychic. And then, the other normal reasons to ban, if a Pokemon is just naturally broken, which is in the case of Mega Salamence, or if the Pokemon forms a deadly core or has really good team support to make it broken, such as Mega Slowbro. And therefore, now we come to the 3 bans during this part of the metagame. So, I think there was a really good point on this thread that kind of resonated with me, why it was really good to ban Kyurem White and Shaman Sky. It was the fact that you can't fix broken with broken. 2 wrongs really don't make a right. And that's what the Monotype community essentially tried to do in order to kind of elevate the shittiness of Ice and Grass. They said, okay, let's bring down these 2 broken Uber's bonds and just leave them at the type. But then it just became crazy how Kyurem White and Shaman Sky influenced the game, because Kyurem is just ridiculously powerful, and Ice versus, there are some matchups where it's just like, if there's a Kyurem White there, it's GG, and depending on the right set, it's GG. Shaman Sky was probably annoying because of its haxiness. Its speed was one of the fastest threats in the game. It had Healing Wish, and then Serene Grace with Seed Flares to cause -2 drops, and then Air Slash, and then with good coverage and Earth Power, or you could run Subseed. It's crazy. It's actually crazy. Shaman Sky would be cool on Grass, but then it got sent back. And then finally, Mega Gallade was banned. Basically, they said it had amazing team support on Psychic, and that's why it was banned. But a lot of the community and myself at the time were thinking, WTF, I understand banning these 2 monsters, but why Mega Gallade? At that point, Mega Gallade was kind of seen as a panic ban at this point, where it was like, it's considered a very bad ban, and actually actually, we are able to fix it later on, but at this point, everybody's like, why the hell are we banning Mega Gallade? There was some controversy between Kieran White and Shaman Sky. Some people were upset, but overall, I think people kind of understood why those types had, or not those types, but those mons had to go. And that's that. Now we move on to the next Banhammer, and the next Banhammer involves Mega Metagross, Greninja, and then Zapdos specifically on flying. Now, Mega Metagross, not many people really batted an eye because Mega Metagross was already on the two kingpins of Monotype, Steel and Psychic, and with its new ability, Tough Claws at this point, the boost in speed, the boost in bulk, coverage moves, it was another threat that both of these types had to work with. So, it made Rock, it made Fairy and Ice even more obsolete than it already was versus Steel. And then Rock, which could have a chance with T-Tar and maybe a Scarf Tarag or something, it was just all for naught, a Psychic versus Rock matchup with a Mega Metagross there. So that's why Mega Metagross was globally banned, because its versatility and its great offensive presence, along with the type that it was associated with. Now we go to Greninja. So Greninja basically got banned because of Protean. Protean created a lot of diversity, and mainly the addition of Gunk Shot. Now Gunk Shot was the blessing that caused Greninja to essentially go over the edge with Life Orb Gunk Shot, coverage with HP Fire, Rock Slide, and whatever you wanted. It was just a monster. Protean Ice Beam, and then Scarf on Dark. So let's take Dark actually as an example. So Dark, with Greninja on it, with a Scarf Greninja on it, Dark shits on, Dark shits on ground, for example, with coverage of Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, Grass Knot. But then you can say, oh, what about Excadrill? What about Excadrill? It's faster than a Scarf Greninja in the sand. Yeah, that's true, but then you just have a Mandibuzz there, Foul Play, Knockoff, dead. So the one thing that outspeeds, and then ground is just completely put into the dirt. And then the last thing, and I think this is the most important ban, at least in my opinion at this time, was the banning of Zapdos from flying. So this is actually a very good written explanation here. So there was this thing in Monotype for Mono Flying in Gen 6 called Skarmdos. So you know how we had Skarm Chansey and OU, or Skarm Bliss in the older gens? Well, in Monotype it's Skarm Zapdos. The defensive capabilities of Skarmory plus the Spadef capabilities of Zapdos, along with Zapdos being the most consistent defogger, it allowed Flying to have that really nice and solid defensive core, and also still have freaking Charizard X just sitting there. Because back then, and I know in Gen 7 Charizard X is no longer allowed on Flying, but it was about the type that the mon was originally, so Charizard X was free in Gen 6. So with Charizard X's sweeping potential plus the defensive backbone of Skarmory, Zapdos, Landorus Eye. Landorus Eye is not really defensive, but its typing is nice. And then heck, you could even run Gliscor. Flying's defensive capabilities along with its offensive capabilities just made it a ridiculous spearhead. And basically, the people were thinking, okay, maybe we should do a complex ban of banning Skarmory and Zapdos, where they can't be used on the same team, but that was super complicated, so basically they went for the next best thing, which was getting rid of Zapdos. To get rid of that fat core, Flying was less dominant, because then if they wanted to have a defensive playstyle, then they would have to attribute a little bit more resources to that playstyle, or they could just go straight up offensive. Basically, it was kind of just a little, not really a little, but just a nerf on Flying, because Flying was already just so good here. For example, they were saying Zapdos was the typical electric sponge absorber, so a way to mitigate that would be maybe Spadef or defensive Mega Charizard X, which is niche and takes away the firepower that Flying has, and therefore Zapdos was banned from Flying. And then the reception of these bands was actually not too bad, according to these forums. Some people obviously have their says you can't please anybody, but for the most part, these bands I think were very good for the game, and it definitely helped the Monotype game at this point. I also forgot to mention that before these bands came about, like let's say after the banning of Shaman Sky, Kirim White, and Mega Glade, it kind of turned. We had a little turn of the page of the banning system, because normally it was just a forum with people discussing it, and then one or a few people ultimately deciding the ban. But now, basically, we had a group of advisors, which eventually would evolve into the Monotype Council. So at this point, there was a small group of people who, in the end, would make the decision, and then it became the Monotype Council, which we will talk about later. So sometime after the ban of Zapdos on flying, basically the esteemed Monotype Council was created, and their first order of business was to get rid of Smooth Rock. Already we had gotten rid of Damp Rock because Swift Swim Kingdra along with and friends was just ridiculous. 8 turns of rain just sitting there, 8 turns of ridiculous speed with hard-hitting specs, and with a new toy in Mega Swampert, albeit it had to waste a turn to protect because it was slow beforehand, it was still crazy. It was still crazy. So basically, it seems like all 5 of the council members, as we are showing here, all decided to ban Smooth Rock on ground. Basically, Smooth Rock is run on Hippo typically, and basically it just fueled Excadrill. And actually, because of this, it kind of fueled the whole eject button Hippo into Excadrill, which was pretty good, but still not as good as 8 turns of an Excadrill. Because once an Excadrill gets an SD, 8 turns of just that monster sitting you in the face doing damage to your team is scary. So after this, basically, Naughty Man here decided to post his thoughts about Mega Altaria, and basically they were starting to see how Mega Altaria was a big problem. And honestly, I didn't really see Mega Altaria that much on flying. It was mostly on Dragon, because even though with the new fairy types immune to Dragon at this point, Dragon Monotype was still pretty good. Hard hitting, really good coverage, the ground Fire Dragon coverage is always great. All the Mons have good stats. I mean, the Lotties, Dragonite, Garchomp, pseudo legendaries, Hydra, and Mega Altaria's type was really good. Imagine Dragon, one of its few weaknesses, Dragon itself. Mega Altaria completely mitigates that. And then Fairy Dragon itself is just a ridiculous type pick. Other than let's say Mega Venusaur, there really isn't a Mon, that will die to a base, depending on the set of Mega Altaria. A lot of people ran Dragon Dance Roost, they could run Dragon Dance Roost 2 attacks, but then towards the end, before Mega Altaria got banned, it eventually got to the point where people were running Cotton Guard, DD Cotton Guard or DD Heal Bell, mono attacking return. Basically, they were using Altaria's really excellent typing to kind of just DD and just sweep at the end. Once everything else was worn down, the Toxicers were gone, the Will Whispers were gone, or the hard, that was for the Cotton Guard set, and then for the healing, or for the Heal Bell set, it was once all the toxic Mons and the defensive options were gone, then it's time to just sweep and sweep. I don't know. Yeah, I'm actually fucking up. Yeah, I would say that, once you got rid of all the hard hitters, then the Heal Bell set would be really good. And once you got rid of all the statusers, then the Cotton Guard set would be excellent. So this ban of Altaria did not actually come from the esteemed Mono Council. Basically, what happened was this was the first suspect test in Monotype. Actually, it was a public suspect test, which was really good for the community. And basically, the requirements were 2600 coil on the Monotype ladder, with obviously an alt account. And eventually, what happened was that 83% of the 42 people who met the requirements voted ban on flying, but surprisingly only 64% voted for the ban on Dragon. So you can see the numbers right here, 35 out of 42 on Flying. Mainly that was probably bolstered because Flying is already a ridiculous type. Mega Altaria would make it even more ridiculous, especially with its defensive capabilities, potentially mitigating for Zapdos, although it didn't get Defog at the time, so it wasn't, you know, the reliable defogger Zapdos was, but still nonetheless, it was a great defensive backbone, and it wasn't weak to rocks, so that was really good. And then the Dragon ban, for me, I mainly decided to get rid of it because of the Dragon ban, because Dragon versus Electric, no matter how well you played, honestly, I remember getting, you know, I would always get swept by Altaria in the end, no matter how hard I played, no matter how hard I outplayed the Garchomp or the Dragonite or even the Lotties. With Electric, at that point, not having Tapu Koko, there were really no options. So that's really why I decided to ban it, or decided to vote ban. But eventually, yeah, it did get banned, and everybody was like, hooray! So that's it for Mega Altaria. And then, after that, Mono's popularity kind of came into the age where it started to rise. This public suspect test was actually a pretty good success, and it kind of paved the way for Monotype to rise to being more than just like an offhand metagame, and eventually becoming the official tier that it is now. Now we move on to the change in philosophy and what eventually shapes kind of the current state of the Monotype tiering philosophy. So in this era of ORAS Mono, we have Zapdos coming back from the depths to have its type ban removed, and then Charizard X eventually being globally banned. Genesect, which wasn't on Steel but is on Bug, was finally sent to the Shadow Realm, and Mega Gallade was brought back to its depths. And basically, the justifications were mainly involving the simplification of a ban list. Here in this thread, it talks about how, like, you know, people who are introduced to the metagame would be like, okay, why is Zapdos banned on Flying but it's not on Electric? Zapdos isn't really a broken Mon. What the heck is Monotype thinking? Basically, this kind of shows how Monotype was growing in an audience, and you know, you had kind of the normies finally streaming in to play Monotype. So we understood why Zapdos was banned, but it doesn't look good when you're trying to grow a metagame. So the reason why Charizard X was banned was, you know, it wasn't because it was ridiculously super broken, but it was kind of to update the tiering philosophy. They wanted to get rid of type-only bans, so, you know, instead of getting rid of Zapdos only on Flying, let's just get rid of Charizard X altogether. Fire still has Charizard Y, and once again, Flying still has those options. While it may not have the power of Charizard X anymore, there are still so many options that Flying has. Thunderous I, Landorus I, and then that introduced Tornadus into the equation. Like, Flying was definitely okay. It was not going to die without Charizard X. Sorry, Bug. But Genesect had to go. Once again, type-only bans, trying to make the ban list a little bit simpler, and same thing with Gallade. Now, the question you're wondering here is, in terms of type bans, isn't Aegislash still around? So, Aegislash, it's like, Aegislash is still around, and that actually is the case. While it's kind of contradictory what they're kind of saying at this point, we don't want type bans. They're saying if we removed it from Ghost, it would ridiculously nerf a type that's already limited, I guess. And also, if you were to bring it on Steel, it would make Steel not just broken, but just over the top. Because like while the Blade is still a nice Ghost Steel type to prevent, you know, the spam of close combat versus Steel type teams. You know, one knockoff and then its Eviolite's gone, and you know, it has to hold Eviolite. It has no reliable recovery, and it's not as strong as Aegislash. Aegislash with King Shield, and then, you know, having base 150 attacks while still running defensive EVs is just retarded in my opinion. So Steel, once again, for the sake of Steel not being busted and for the sake of Ghost not being ass, Aegislash was actually kept on there. Then here is more kind of details about the or the monotype tiering philosophy, and this is actually on like the current old forums page for Gen 6 monotype. And the first point is keeping the ban list simple. 2, banning the elements of the metagame that make it uncompetitive or unhealthy. And 3, no single type should be that powerful, or like that broken. And then basically they use this Scizor versus Talonflame example to depict whether something is broken or not, and I'm going to leave links to all the threads that I've been using and getting my information on, so you can read that on your own time. So with that comes kind of the modern day ORAS. Well, not really the modern day ORAS, but we're almost there. But basically, this is kind of where everything, the craziness slows down, and it just becomes the point where we're just banning stuff like normals. We're not really fixing our philosophy. But actually, before we get to that stable point, we have to touch on Aegislash. Eventually, at this point, it wasn't banned, but eventually the council finally decided, okay, we're gonna get rid of it. And the entire community was actually kind of like, what the hell, oh, blah blah blah, you're gonna blah blah blah, oh, you're ruining Ghost, yada yada yada, and all that stuff. But if you're gonna stick to your guns and get rid of type only bans, then you gotta get rid of Aegislash. I may have jumped the gun in the last part talking about the Aegislash global ban, so we're going to talk about it again here. So I hope you like hearing about Aegislash some more. So the next ban to go up for debate was the Sable Knight suspect test. So this suspect test was for Mega Sableye. Once again, Sableye with its bulky defenses, access to magic bounce, really helped Dark, really bolstered Ghost. Its calm mindset, towards the beginning of ORAS, the most common set was the Calm Mind Sweeper set, Calm Mind, Will-O-Wisp Recover, then typically Dark Balls. But then as the meta wore on, as we're going to find later, it became more of a utility type of mon. So after the Sableye suspect test, which was kind of the same as the Mega Altaria test, you needed 2600 coil on an alt. The actual results are shown here, and basically it was announced before every vote was counted, but since you need 60% of the votes in order to get a ban, basically at that point where we was deemed dead, the ban percentage was at 37.8%, 28 voting for ban, 46 for do not ban. So basically they were saying for the remaining voters, the maximum amount of percentage for it to be banned would be 51%. So there's like, okay, Sable Knight is not banned. And after that, then we have finally the banning of Aegislash. And then that's where the community erupted, and a lot of people are just like, oh my goodness, you're taking a step back in balancing the tier, because now, you're getting rid of one of the things that holds Ghost together. But then other people counter and just say, oh, yeah, sure, we're dropping the hammer on Ghost, but once again, we already acknowledge that Monotype at this point was overly centralized with, once again, Psychic, Water, Steel, Flying, ruling the game. So, if we're gonna stick to our guns with our philosophy, we're gonna stick to it. And here is where Aegislash finally went out the door. So it was after Sable Knight stayed is when Aegislash finally got sent out. And personally, I think it's the fact that Sable Knight stayed was probably the proponent to get rid of Aegislash, because the thing is, you can stick to your guns with your philosophy, and you still have this mon which was at least perceived to be busted or somewhat busted. So Ghost can't be that bad, right? So that is what probably ultimately pushed Aegislash over the edge and finally onto the ban list. Now we'll finally talk about the last part of the Monotype banning, or the Monotype banning game, and how the tiers shifted. in the double suspects of Hoopa and Sableye. Already we talked about Sableye round 1, and trust me, it's going to be back. So the first thing we see after the first Sableye suspect test was a Hoopa Unbound suspect test. The funny thing is though, Hoopa was actually initially going to be quick banned, but then the council decided, okay, we're going to suspect test Hoopa. Hoopa at this point was ridiculous, coming off 160, 170 attacking prowess, and then, once again, another addition to Psychic, and Dark was still a pretty good type, so, should we ban it? This time the requirements were a little bit tougher. There's a 90 game limit, and the coil had to be, what was it? I think it was 2850. Yeah, the coil requirement this time was 2850, and basically, and then the results basically show, if we look for Hoopa round 1, that the percentage of bans was 51.85%. That was counting the votes already tallied. Without the untallied votes, the maximum that the ban percentage could go to was 54.69. So at this point, yeah, Hoopa was going to stay. So with Hoopa staying, then we come back to Sableye Part 2. Fun. So Sableye Part 2. So finally, after the whole Aegislash debacle and people going wham Aegislash, people are like, oh wow, I forgot. Sableye and his bulky defense is kind of dismembered types such as rock, ice, electric, and poison. Literally, I can speak for that myself. Unless you have the niche, Mold Breaker, Toxic Ampharos, there is nothing that electric can do versus Mega Sableye, honestly. You'd have to get it in on a Specs Raikou, but that's not really that hard to make sure that it doesn't get in on a mon that's not Specs Raikou or Specs Magnezone. So, in this suspect test, the requirements were 3120 coil at this point. I don't think there was a game limit in this one, so the results of this one were actually pretty close. I don't actually have it pulled up, unfortunately. Actually, I can pull it up right now. Let me pull it up again. Here we go. So the Sableye, spoilers, Sableye round 2 was a ban by one vote. The final ban was 60.53%. 60.53%, which is 0.5% more than what you needed to ban it. So it was right there on the edge. It was literally right there on the edge, and because of that, Sableye finally got sent to the Shadow Realm. Most people were agreeing, and they were like, finally this thing is banned. I think a lot of people were speculating that a lot of people who kind of suspected in this test why it was so close was the fact that it was kind of like a fuck you vote for like, okay, I'm going to vote no ban. I'm going to vote no ban because you guys screwed over Aegislash and Ghost. But in the end, Sableye was able to finally be destroyed, and then we move on to the final suspect test before the metagame ended. No news about Volcanion, because Volcanion wasn't really that revolutionary, and Hoopa was suspected again, and as the results show, it became a no ban. A lot of people say that Hoopa stayed because, it was Dark type's answer to fighting, because at this point, now that we have no Mega Sableye, oh boy, fighting runs wild. I love spamming fighting, and with no more flying, that defensive core, or not really no more of that defensive core, but with no more Charizard X to completely dismantle fighting. Heck, I was one double away from beating fighting. Fighting was good. Without Sableye, Mega Metachan could just kick and kick and kick and kick. So I guess Hoopa was an answer to fighting. I don't really know whether that's valid or not, but that's what I've heard. That's what I've seen on some of these forums. But once again, I'm kind of doing this from memory and just from small little tidbits here. So eventually Hoopa was decided to not be banned for a second time, and that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of diving in back into that. I can't fucking talk. I hope you guys enjoy this history lesson, I guess. This history lesson on how Monotype is shaped and how it kind of evolved, especially around Gen 6, and now how it turned into the metagame that we know today, and how we're now on the official tier list of small gun. Because back then it was more complicated, you know, back in the Frost days and the League days and all that shit. Well, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.